Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, we are talking about conquering your fear. As it's said in Dune, fear is the mind killer, right? Fear is the thing that holds us back. Fear is the thing that causes people who would otherwise appear brave to buckle at the knees and quiver and cower and decide that they're not going to do that thing. Fear is the thing that kept you from asking that girl back out in the to go dance with you at the middle school dance. Not that that ever happened to me. So, what is fear and why does fear have such a strong hold on us? So, I've been doing a little more reading on psychology lately, and so I just wanted to throw some of my mind facts out there for you. There's like four basic emotions that everybody feels, and I this blew my mind. Like, so they've run the tests on animals, they've run the tests on humans, and what they did is like they cracked the skull open, they found the part of the brain, I think it's the amygdala, that is responsible for producing your emotions. And then they would zap certain parts of it. And so after zapping enough brains and on across different species, they found that there's four basic emotions, and that's joy, sadness, anger, and fear. And so fear is one of those things that's just absolutely ingrained in us. Like we have no way of stopping ourselves from having the feeling of fear. It's just part of who we are. You couldn't stop yourself from feeling happy sometimes any more than you could stop yourself from feeling angry sometimes, or sad sometimes, or fearful sometimes. So that is kind of where fear comes from, like in a biological sense. But I like there's Napoleon Hill. He's one of my favorite authors, and he's kind of like one of the founding fathers of personal development. Years and years and years ago, he wrote materials, and he said that there were six basic fears. He eventually said there were seven basic fears. I don't count the seventh. Like, there's six basic fears. And so, if you think about it, anything that's holding you back is probably based on fear. Okay. Anything that you think you're not good enough, based on fear. If you're not taking the risks, it's based on fear. If you're not, if you're not doing something that you should, it's probably because of fear. Some type of fear is holding you back, preventing you from reaching the goal that you've set for yourself. So what are the main types of fear? So there's the fear of poverty, the fear of old age, the fear of death, the fear of loss of love of somebody, the fear of criticism, and the fear of illness. All right. So those are the six basic fears according to Napoleon Hill. And for a good number of people, there's only there's probably three or four, two for sure, that are more powerful than others. Like, I'm not afraid of death, right? I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of dying. Totally different, right? Death, I'm good on. Injury, I worry about sometimes. So fear of illness, right? So that I'm not a huge fan of that, but it doesn't necessarily hold me back. If someone's like, hey, let's go jump out of a plane with some parachutes, I'm like, okay, sure. The other ones out there, so it's the ones that like really get people. It could be the fear of loss of love of someone. If you are afraid that your mother, your father, your spouse, your kids, your friend is not going to like you anymore because you do something, or if you change, or if you move, as an example, that's a big one. Like, my mother is just not going to like me the same way if I move across country. Fear of loss of love of somebody. Okay. And another one that's really big is fear of criticism. A lot of people aren't willing to put themselves out there because they're afraid of what they will say. Well, who is they? First of all, like the general masses. Well, the general masses aren't even going to see your stuff. That they control so much of so many people's lives that, a lot of people who would be fantastic personalities, fantastic content creators, aren't doing it just because they're like, oh, what if somebody says something? And then, God forbid somebody actually does hate on your video or hate on the piece of content you make. And we like, oh God, they don't like it. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have done this. And it reinforces that fear. So that's another big one. Fear of poverty, huge one. That one terrifies so many people. And in fact, actually prevents people from doing the things that they should be doing in order to make money to not be in poverty. So oftentimes one of these fears will get you, right? You'll get caught by this fear, you get all worked up about it, and then you get worked up about being worked up, and then you create this habit of being worked up about the thing that you actually forget what you were worked up about in the first place, and you're just worked up for no particular reason. And that's a lot of psychoses. That's a good reason some people have depression. It's not the only reason. Some people actually have major chemical issues, but some people just get themselves into a state that they don't know how to get out of that state. It's just they're constantly feeling stressed and worried because of something that happened a long time ago that they don't necessarily even remember happening. And now they're in homeostasis. Their cells are expecting those neuropeptides. God, I tell you that like psychology stuff is fantastic. If you want to learn how you work, how other people work, check out psychology stuff. But fear of poverty, this one, if you're broke and you know you should get up off your butt and go out there and like look for that job or go out there and knock on more doors or to sell something or whatever, but you don't because you're just too stressed out and you're too worried and you're too scared, you're creating your own prison. All right. If you're afraid of what they will say, and you're creating your own prison by not putting yourself out there and just not caring what they have to say. All right. Fear of illness is, illness. We're worried that we're not going to be able to work. We're worried about, what'll happen to our family. I get you. And that keeps people from taking risks. That's why so many parents are like, don't do that. Oh, you'll hurt yourself. You'll put your eye out. Right? Yeah, I'm sure some number of kids have put their eye out doing that thing, but it's not the majority of people. And because of that, the next generation goes, I shouldn't let my child put a fork near their eye because what if they put their eye out? Rather than, not caring. Like it's, that's just one of those things that gets perpetuated. All right. What am I missing? The other one, old age. Old age is something like I was actually just interviewed by somebody just before I did this, before I'm recording this. And the guy who interviewed me is 13 years old. And while he's talking and interviewing me, he's talking about way back when, a long time ago, when this thing happened. And it was like 6 years ago. And I'm like, bro, that's not. He's like, oh, yeah, I was talking about how I had an old Game Boy when I was young. And he's like, oh, yeah, I had a Game Boy SP Advance, too. And I'm like, oh, kid, that was way later. Like, no, I had like an old one. And made me feel a little bit old. But, age is not necessarily a number, right? I've met, age is a number. Old people is not a number. Being old is not a number. People are old in their minds. All right. You probably know that like 30-something-year-old person in your life who is like totally crotchety and doesn't want to go out and doesn't like doing things and doesn't want to try new things. That person's old already. There actually is a correlation between doing new things and feeling old. The more new things you try, the less old you feel. Imagine that. All right. So if you're out there and you're willing to keep trying and you're willing to keep doing new things, you're willing to just not allow yourself to get stuck in a rut, you're less likely to feel old and you're going to be able to do things. And I mean, there's people who are in their 80s, in their 90s doing triathlons for the first time. They may have an advanced number of years, doesn't make them old. All right. So the fears hold us back. You have to find a way to conquer your fears. It's the only way to move forward. And, it's so great. Hey, Brad, thanks so much for telling me to conquer my fears. I went out and did it, right? Like bravery is the act of courage. Okay. So courage being the quality, it is a thing that you have. Bravery is the act of. So to be courageous is to be someone who is able to do something in the face of fear, right? Bravery is the act of actually implementing that courage and doing the thing. So bravery is something that you can get into the habit of doing. So this is something that they find in armed forces. And I've done a lot of work with veterans. And so I've had to read lots of studies on this. Armed forces, so soldiers, when they're in combat situations, they're terrified. Maybe not all of them, but a good number of them will admit, oh yeah, I was terrified. they still do the thing because they've been put into situations enough times that they had to keep doing it. They had to go forward. They had to be brave in spite of the fact that they were fearful. And so you can take that lesson to heart and go, you know what? Next time I'm afraid, I'm just going to push through. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take a deep breath and just do the thing. And you know what? It's going to be absolutely terrifying. But if you do it again and again and again and again and again and again until you have developed the habit of pushing through that fear, you're still going to have the fear. It's one of those 4 basic emotions. There's nothing you can do to stop that feeling from popping up, but you're going to be less sensitized to it. You're not going to necessarily care, like, yeah, a little bit worried, but I'm going to do it anyway. You'll just you'll move forward. That is how you conquer fear. All right. And that is how you can build any type of business you want. Look, if you think you're introverted, you're only introverted because you haven't put yourself out there enough times in the spirit of not wanting to be introverted anymore. Too many people put themselves out there and go, I'm introverted. Oh, this is going to suck. And like they walk up to someone and they're thinking, I'm introverted, I'm introverted, I'm introverted. And so while they're talking to the person, they're like, I'm introverted, I'm introverted, I'm introverted. And then they look like a deer in a headlight and they walk away and they're like, oh God, thank God I got that done with. I'm introverted. I shouldn't be having conversations like that. That's just not who I am. Well, it's no wonder that they don't ever get out of being introverted. They sat there and told themselves over and over and over again. Maybe instead, the next time you go through that, when you feel that feeling of I'm introverted, go, but I don't want to be. And you put yourself in like, I don't want to be introverted. I don't want to be introverted. And you try to like act courageous. You act brave in the face of that fear. Maybe start telling yourself, I want to be extroverted. I want to be able to put myself out there. I want to be able to say the things I wish I could say. And if you act on that, if you go through it, you develop those habits because that is how the human mind works. We're giant monkey robots that we can program. So that was a wonderful little rant. I'm going to remind you all, organization is the enemy of sloth. Everything I've told you today in this episode is something that you can craft with meticulous detail into your life. You can figure out how to get over the fear of poverty, the fear of old age, the fear of loss of love of somebody. If you can identify the fact that that is what is holding you back, right? You name it and you have power over it. That's, you name the witch and you got the witch, right? Rumpelstiltskin. Once they figured out his name, they had control over him. He disappeared. That's how fear works. If you can name the fear that you have, you can decide that you don't want to have that fear anymore. If you don't want to have the fear anymore, you just go through the practice of getting through the fear until you develop the habit of not acting on the fear. You act on the courage, on the bravery. All right. There's no such thing as getting rid of old habits. People who try to stop smoking, they will constantly think about smoking the rest of their life. It's always there. The habit's always there. They have to replace it with other habits to try to really stamp it out. So you'll see people who get into bodybuilding, for example, because they really wanted to quit smoking. Like I knew somebody who wanted to quit smoking, got into bodybuilding, and that was that person's entire focus. Their whole life now revolved around bodybuilding. Anytime they thought about smoking, they had to lift some weight. And so they got into the habit of exercising and working out and bodybuilding to the point that's all they wanted to do. They replaced a very strong emotion with another very strong emotion. And now they don't really consider ever smoking anymore because they know that if they do, they won't be able to have this because it'll replace that. And they like this more. So that is how you get rid of your fear. That's how you conquer your fear. You have to figure out what fear you have and then find a way to replace it with a more positive outlook on your life. That sounds like a bunch of pseudoscience and BS, but that's what the psychology all says. That's what I got for you all today. Don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.